10 years later, some of the victims' families of the Marikana Massacre have yet to see justice. Power to Truth host JJ Tabane asked whether this massacre will go down in history as the tragedy or travesty of socio-economic justice in post-democratic South Africa. He joins me now to reflect on the paper he's written on the matter. JJ, thank you very much for your time. You know what I found interesting in your paper especially is the fact that you have unions or you have the tripartite alliance, COSATU, which has affiliates like the NUMSA, etc., that is supposed to actually represent the workers, but they failed, and they still fail to have represented workers who just wanted 12,500 rand.
Absolutely, and that's why I afternoon to you, Masego. That's why I argue that this whole Marikana thing brings to the surface once again a conspiracy between the private sector and the public sector. In that the greedy capital and government, what I call a tone-deaf government, conspired to make sure Marikana happens. And if this was not the case, when Ramaphosa wrote an email to his comrades in government saying, let them take concomitant action, they could have told him, no, but this is a labor matter, sort it out as a company. Lawmen doesn't need police to sort out a security matter. They can have their own security. I'm sure they've got their own in-house security and so on. But because there was this conspiracy that continues now, even when you look at the tripartite alliance, with the unions being in the pockets of the ruling party, you now have this continuation of this kind of conspiracy where the lives of black people don't matter, where salaries can just be cancelled, like we've seen with what government did with reneging on its 3-year agreement with workers. So this thing continues. Marikana was only something that sort of got out of hand. But if you look at many examples after Marikana in the last 10 years, you would realize that we haven't learned much from that experience.
And what you mentioned is quite important, because if you look at a COSATU, for instance, which was fighting via NUMSA and Nahawu, rather, in terms of fighting for nurses' rights and their payments, they at some point said that they would ask their members not to vote for the ANC at the local government elections. But they were the same people who were then seen in ANC regalia campaigning for the party to be voted for in November last year.
You must never believe COSATU or the SACP when they threaten that they will not vote for the ANC. These people are eating from the same trough, and they must just be considered to be branches of the ANC. They are no longer a conscience of the ANC. You know, the SACP used to be like a think tank of the ANC. You know, COSATU used to be like a conscience of the movement. I mean, if you remember the days of the likes of Jane Naidu as secretary of COSATU, those people would bring the country to a standstill if something that the workers don't like is placed in legislation or regulations or anything like that. All of that is gone now. So you have a situation where there's no longer a difference between COSATU and the ANC and the SACP. It's just one thing, with people who are just eating from the same patronage network. Right, and unfortunately, with the Marikana, it went out of hand. I mean, you wouldn't expect somebody like Cyril Ramaphosa, who himself was a union leader, to try and unleash state power on poor workers who are only asking for a meager increase. So this is the situation we are sitting with today. That carries on. If you look at the riots that are happening in the various townships, it's the same thing, right? Where you have a situation where workers or worker organizations have forgotten why indeed their mandate is to be vanguards of workers.
And I mean, looking at the issue that we have in South Africa when it comes to accountability, whether it be the public or private sector, we know that, of course, government, there's some people who have been found guilty of corruption, but then there's the private sector that enables this to happen as well. But if you look at NUM, a union that Cyril Ramaphosa is a huge part of, having represented workers in Marikana in the beginning until they fought with AMCU. So it's still, accountability versus who you know and who you know at that point.
Exactly. That's why I call it a conspiracy. Because if it was another board member, just a normal board member like me in some company, if I wrote an email to a minister of police to say, please take concomitant action, they were going to ask me, what do you mean? I mean, why must I be involved in your business, you know? Unless those people are burning down your buildings, it's a different matter. We can bring the fire brigade. But if you say to me, shoot and kill these people, because really that's what that email meant. You can interpret it the way you like, but it is at the heart of a culpability of Ramaphosa, and there's a court case, by the way, about that, because he thought he got away with it by the Falam Commission being a whitewash of this thing. This thing is as direct as it gets. In law, something called, dolus eventualis. Yeah. If he didn't write that email, those workers would be alive today. And this is my problem with COSATU and SACP is that they don't point this out to him, that he should take accountability, lead by example, and go there and say sorry. You know, he doesn't, because this is generally just another day in the life of a government. 10 years on, it doesn't matter to them. The Solicitor General was on my show yesterday, basically just washing his hands to say, well, what, we are working on it, they'll get paid next week, and so on. And it doesn't befall them that if something happened 10 years ago, where are the families, where are the dependents, where are people who must be compensated? And then they complain that, no, they are moving the goalposts. If you demanded 10 rand in 2012, I mean, there's no longer 10 rand in 2022, it's zero. If you look at the inflation, you look at all of these things. So Marikana, unfortunately, we haven't learned much from it, Masego. When you look at what happened in Tembisa, where 4 people were killed during the protest, when the Falam Commission spent a lot of time saying you need to train your police to be able to handle protests better. Does it mean that after 10 years they haven't learned anything in terms of handling protests?
Well, it seems so.
We're a protest-heavy country, you know?
Well, it's unfortunate, JJ, that I've run out of time because we can speak about this for quite a long time. There's the Falam versus Zondo and the NPA, whether or not they'll actually have the political will or even the strength to go after all these people. Police brutality that we've seen repeat itself from, for instance, even the fees must fall days, etc. So we could talk about this for a long time. That is JJ Tabane, the host of Power to Truth here on eNCA. All right, we'll